What if I told you a humble, quiet sedan, mocked for being slow and nerdy, ended up changing the way the entire world thinks about cars? In the early 2000s, the Toyota Prius didn't just save drivers money at the pump. It became a Hollywood icon, a symbol of going green, and the blueprint for the electric revolution we're living through today. From its risky birth in Japan, to the gas crisis that turned it into a hero, to the critics who couldn't stop talking about it, this is the untold story of how one car rewired our roads and our minds. Buckle up, because this is the dawn of hybrids. What if I told you there was a time when the idea of driving a car that didn't rely entirely on gasoline sounded almost laughable? Let's rewind to the late 1990s. Gas was cheap, at least cheaper than it would be just a few years later. Big, powerful sedans and SUVs ruled the roads. The louder the engine, the more impressive the car felt. And when it came to saving fuel, well, most people didn't think twice. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. The air in major cities was getting dirtier, smog warnings were becoming common, and scientists were sounding alarms about climate change. Some drivers were starting to feel a quiet guilt every time they filled up their tanks. Still, if you said hybrid car, most would picture a clunky, slow science project. Not something you'd want parked in your driveway. Car companies knew the writing was on the wall. They couldn't ignore rising environmental concerns forever. Yet no one wanted to be the first to take the risky leap. After all, what if people laughed it off? What if it failed? And then, Toyota decided to gamble, not on a faster sports car, not on a bigger SUV, but on a strange new idea. A car that blended gasoline power with electric energy. A car that, at the time, seemed like it belonged more in a sci-fi movie than in a dealership lot. That decision would change everything. But in the world of the 1990s, it was still just a daring dream waiting for its moment. In the mid-90s, Toyota wasn't just building cars. They were chasing an idea that sounded risky, maybe even impossible. Their engineers called it the G21 project, a mission to create a 21st century car that would cut fuel use in half without making drivers feel like they were sacrificing performance. The problem? No one had done it before at a scale that made sense for everyday buyers. Batteries weren't as advanced, hybrid systems were expensive, and skeptics inside Toyota itself doubted it could work. But the company's leadership saw the bigger picture. Japan's cities were choked with traffic and pollution. Oil dependency was a growing political and economic headache. If Toyota could pull this off, they wouldn't just make a new car, they'd rewrite the rules of the industry. The first Prius prototype wasn't flashy. In fact, it was boxy and almost awkward. But under that plain body was something revolutionary. Toyota's hybrid synergy drive, a seamless blend of gasoline and electric power that promised efficiency without constant charging. Engineers worked day and night, refining every detail, solving heat issues, battery limitations, and software glitches. By 1997, the Prius was ready for launch in Japan. Toyota called it just in time for the 21st century. Few realized then that this odd-looking sedan was about to start a movement that would stretch far beyond Japan's borders. When the Prius rolled into the US in 2000, it would start, the way the engine sometimes went silent at stoplights. It all felt cars, pickups, and SUVs. Not quiet, modest sedans with a digital screen showing real-time fuel economy. For many, the Prius was a mystery. Why pay extra for something that looked ordinary when gas was still affordable? Toyota knew it had to win over hearts, not just wallets. They marketed the Prius as a car for forward thinkers, the kind of people who didn't just follow trends but set them. Early adopters loved the idea of driving something that felt like a sneak peek into the future. The digital dashboard, the push button felt almost magical. It wasn't just about saving fuel, it was about driving differently. And slowly, the Prius began to gather a small but loyal fan base of tech enthusiasts, environmentalists, and curious drivers who enjoyed answering the inevitable, "What is that thing?" at gas stations. By the early 2000s, the Prius was more than a novelty. It was becoming a symbol, a quiet rebellion against the status quo, whispering that maybe the way we drive could change for good. Came when Hollywood noticed. Suddenly, paparazzi photos showed stars like Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, and Natalie Portman stepping out of their Priuses at red carpet events. This wasn't just a car anymore. It was a fashion statement. In an industry obsessed with luxury sports cars and stretch limos, the Prius stood out precisely because it wasn't trying to be flashy. Owning one sent a message. I care about the planet more than horsepower. And in the early 2000s, that message was rare enough to be intriguing. Entertainment news segments began running features on the celebrity hybrid, and talk shows joked about the Prius as the ultimate green carpet accessory. For younger fans watching their favorite stars embrace hybrids, it was proof that eco-friendly could be stylish. Toyota couldn't have planned better marketing if they tried. Overnight, the Prius shifted from an eco-nerd's dream to a trendy, aspirational ride. Hollywood had done what no ad campaign could. It made hybrids cool. Then came the mid-2000s fuel crisis. Gas prices didn't just creep up, they skyrocketed. Families felt the pinch at every fill-up, and suddenly miles per gallon wasn't just a talking point, it was survival. This was the Prius moment. While SUV owners groaned at $100 fuel bills, Prius drivers smugly filled their tanks for half the cost and drove twice as far. News outlets began reporting on hybrid savings, and waiting lists for the Prius grew. People who had once dismissed it as too expensive now saw it as an investment. Resale values stayed high, and Toyota could barely keep up with demand. The Prius wasn't just an environmental choice anymore. It was a smart financial one. Gas station conversations changed too. Where Prius owners once fielded skeptical questions, they now got admiring nods. Hybrids were no longer the future. They were the present, and the Prius was leading the charge. The magic of the Prius wasn't just in its image, it was in its engineering. At its heart was Toyota's hybrid synergy drive, a clever system that let the gasoline engine and electric motor work together or separately, depending on what the car needed. At low speeds, the Prius could run purely on electric power, producing zero tailpipe emissions. When more power was needed, the gasoline engine kicked in, and when braking, the car used regenerative braking to turn energy into battery charge. For the average driver, this all happened seamlessly. No switches to flip, no plugs to worry about. You just drove and used less fuel doing it. This technology wasn't just efficient, it was reliable. Toyota's engineers built it to last, and many early Priuses racked up hundreds of thousands of miles with their original batteries still going strong. It proved hybrids could be more than experiments. They could be everyday workhorses. By the mid-2000s, owning a Prius had evolved into something bigger than driving a car. It was a personal brand. The subtle badge on the trunk wasn't just a logo, it was a conversation starter. Drivers weren't just saying, "I like good fuel economy." They were saying, "I'm part of a movement." In cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York, Priuses filled the streets, almost like a silent club of forward thinkers. It became a kind of social shorthand. Pull into a coffee shop parking lot in a Prius, and people assumed you cared about sustainability, progressive ideas, maybe even organic food. Whether fair or not, the Prius became a rolling symbol of eco-conscious living. Some critics rolled their eyes, calling it virtue signaling. But for many, that badge was a quiet declaration that they were willing to drive differently. Of course, no cultural shift happens without resistance. The Prius had its share of detractors. Traditional gearheads scoffed at its modest horsepower. Late-night comedians joked about how slow it was. Online forums filled with debates about whether hybrids actually helped the environment once you factored in battery production. Some accused Prius owners of using the car to broadcast moral superiority. Others doubted the long-term durability of hybrid systems. Oil industry voices quietly questioned the car's true impact on fuel consumption. Toyota responded by leaning on data. Real-world fuel savings, low emissions, and customer satisfaction painted a picture of a car that was delivering on its promises. And while critics kept talking, sales kept climbing. The backlash in some ways only cemented the Prius status. If it was sparking this much debate, it was clearly challenging the status quo. By the late 2000s, the Prius was no longer an oddball. It was a blueprint. Automakers around the world began rolling out their own hybrids. The Honda Insight, Ford Escape Hybrid, and Lexus RX Hybrid all followed in its tire tracks. Governments offered tax incentives, cities allowed hybrids into carpool lanes, and the idea of combining gas and electric power became part of the mainstream conversation. Toyota expanded the Prius family into multiple models, proving the concept could work in different shapes and sizes. The hybrid badge started appearing on everything from sedans to SUVs. What began as a niche experiment was now a global shift, and the Prius was the car that proved hybrids could be practical, profitable, and popular. Looking back, the Prius didn't just change how we thought about fuel efficiency. It rewired the way we think about cars entirely. By normalizing electric assistance, it opened the door for fully electric vehicles. The trust Toyota built with hybrid reliability helped pave the way for modern EV giants like Tesla, and for established brands to take electric seriously. Today, as charging stations pop up everywhere and EV sales climb, it's easy to forget that in the 2000s, the idea of anything other than a gas-powered engine felt radical. The Prius was the bridge, the proof that drivers could embrace new tech without fear. Its legacy isn't just in the millions sold, but in the fact that it turned a fringe concept into a global movement. The dawn of hybrids wasn't just the start of a new kind of car. It was the first step toward the future we're driving into now.